morning, everyone. You find us here. It's 12 degrees centigrade, 54 Fahrenheit, and we are alone in the wilderness. 3.5 million hectares of untrammeled African wilderness, 2.2 million of which is the Kruger National Park, 60,000 of which is the Sabi Sands Wildtuin, and 1,500 of which is the little piece of land that we find ourselves on now. It's called Djuma, and we also go on to Arathusa. I say I'm alone in the wilderness because we're on only one vehicle. My name is James Hendry. Behind we have Phil, who's on camera, trussed up like a Michelin man. It's not that warm out here. In the control room we have Tara and Eugene frantically trying to fix the other vehicle, who is Wendy. Wendy is being a bit obstreperous of late. Brent is currently lying in his bed. That is because Wendy is being obstreperous. Our plan this morning is to try and follow up on some leopard that we heard just recently. We're going to head in a northerly direction to see if we can find. I would also very much like to see the lion pride that they saw yesterday, which I managed to miss while I was in Johannesburg. And I also wanted to remind you that we love to hear from you. We love your comments. We love your questions. We love to hear anything you have to say. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at wildearth.tv. I'm just going to let you listen for a quick 10 seconds to what's going on around us, and then we'll move on and see if we can find that leopard. Very nice dawn chorus has started. We've got southern black tit behind, crested barbets, bearded woodpeckers, ringneck doves, rattling cisticolas, oxpeckers, and just the lovely sense of the anticipation of the African dawn. All right, we're going to move on now. I'm going to head off in a northerly direction, like I said. There was the sound of a leopard calling, sounded like a male a bit earlier. We'll see if we can't pick up on him, and also try and find the tracks of that pride that was found yesterday. Right, here we go. Beautiful pink there on the clouds. It's not as cold as it might be. I suspect quite strongly that's because we've had a cloud cover during the night. And well, I think that front that came through last week is probably finished, which is excellent news indeed. I have nothing but positive reports from Jamie, who said you were very kind to her, which is excellent. Thank you for that. She had a great time, so hopefully we'll be seeing more of her soon. We might have to call her something else. It's a bit similar to my name, I think. Morning like this, the leopard will generally keep moving for a little bit longer because the cloud cover gives them a little bit more in the way of olfactory concealment. With a bit of a breeze in the clouds, any animals they might be trying to prey on wouldn't be able to smell them so well. But that said, if he's calling, he's probably not on the hunt. Excuse me 1 second, we have a slight technical hitch, and I'm just going to plug something into this monitor so that I can see what I'm saying to you. Right, there we go. Okay, we're going to carry on. Don't worry about it, Phil. We'll make a plan some other time. Okay, on we go. Checking some traps here. Looks very much to me like a lioness trap. But probably from yesterday. That waterhole was where they were seen yesterday. So maybe we'll be lucky again today, but they will move during the night, but possibly not that far with the little cubs. Anybody out there knows when those cubs are born, it would be great to know, because I find so often we tend to forget when they're born, and suddenly you have a cub that's 3 months old for 4 months. So keep a note of it, and keep a note of how little those cubs are, and let's try and keep an accurate record of their lives. Going to be a magnificent sunrise, sorry. Sunset was yesterday, I think. Hello, Jeffrey in Austin, Texas. Good morning to you. You want to know, are there any records of lion cubs being killed by birds of prey? Jeffrey, I've never heard of one, but I don't think it's impossible. I've heard of leopard cubs being taken, possibly because they tend to be, the mothers have to leave them for longer, and they don't have the protection of a pride. So, I mean, it's certainly possible there are the right size for an eagle or even an eagle owl. So yeah, it's definitely possible. It's a very different atmosphere from the dawn that I experienced in Johannesburg yesterday, where the dawn chorus was made up of sirens and hooting. This is far more pleasant. The crested Franklin heralding the sun as it pops up over the horizon. Hold on tight. Here comes the sun. Getting into the area. Some buffalo there to our left. I'm not going to stop for them now. There's also one on the road in front of us. There he goes. Morning beef. Alright, well, we'll have to stop for him. Can't really go through him, can we? Distinctly unpleasant thing for him to show us at this time of the morning. Come on, get on with it. Now move away. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, particularly respectful of him, but I guess we weren't being that respectful ourselves. Thank you. Righty. Keeping an eye out for the tracks all the time. Tracking can be a very, I mean, you need extreme patience to be a good tracker. And so I've never been a particularly great tracker. But what you do need to do is balance speed with caution and watching what's going on. So I need to keep an eye out for the tracks, but at the same time, if this leopard's moving, then we need to be quite alert to the fact that he could be quite far ahead of us. Now this is where Brent swears blind the last time he heard the leopard was. See any tracks though. There definitely aren't any tracks. So unless the leopard was flying, he wasn't coming along here. I've yet to see, there we go. I've yet to see a flying leopard. There's a hyena that I've just seen. This is round about where they said they heard him. We'll go onto the dam and just see if we can't, see if we'll switch off and see if he doesn't call again. We'll also get a look at the sun, which has just popped up over the horizon. Looks magnificent. I'm just going to listen for the next 30 seconds or so and see if we don't hear him. You can hear the Egyptian goose calling. Many of the European goose species, or North American goose species, the Egyptian goose is not in fact a true goose. We don't actually get, I think other than the spur-winged goose, we don't actually get true geese. The Egyptian goose is in fact a duck. And none of our, as far as I know, well, there are a few of our duck and goose species that do migrate, but the Egyptian goose is not one of them. Now let's just listen for 20 seconds. francolin calling. There's no leopard sound. Okay, so what we're going to do, look at that. I mean, isn't that the most magnificent thing to see in the morning? Here comes the sun. You can just see it peeking through the trees there. Oh, that's just very spectacular. And one of the things that obviously the internet is not able to convey to you just yet is the sense of smell and the freshness that a morning like this brings. I can smell the buffalo that were around yesterday. Buffalo smell like a dairy. So if you've ever been to a dairy, that's what buffalo smell like. Smell a little bit of the mud around the water here. Okay, so what we're going to do is move forward, down, and then just a little bit around south. We're going to sort of circle this area and see if we can't find the tracks of that leopard. And if we can't, we'll probably head off and see if we can't find where that pride went from yesterday. Genevieve in New York, welcome to the gorgeous African morning that we are experiencing here. You want to know about algae. We don't often get questions about algae, but thank you very much for your question. You want to know, do algae, or is there algae, first of all, in the water, and do any animals derive sort of nutrition from it? The answer is absolutely. There's plenty of algae around. Anywhere where we get water, algae will immediately sort of bloom. And there are lots of insects that feed off the algae and feed off various kinds of zoo and phytoplankton and things like, what else would eat it? I mean, some of our fish species here will feed off algae. We have catfish will eat it if there's enough of it. And a lot of the bird species will probably sample it as part of their diets. So yes, lots of algae, and it definitely provides a food source for a number of animals. Right, on we go. Hyena track all over the place, but not much in the way of leopard. Here a little bit earlier this morning here then either. So what I think we'll do is head a little bit further to the east, into that rising sun, and see if we can't get into one of the drainage lines in the area, because the leopards do tend to like the space afforded by drainage lines. I'm going to check carefully here first. No leopard just yet. Quickly and just listen in the drainage line, in the dip. It's cold. They're cold. You might be able to hear that scuffling in the bushes that so often has tricked me. I thought, oh, that sounds like the footfall of a cat. But in actual fact, it turns out to be the footfall of a little covey of francolins. Always nice to see the francolins, though. They're just up ahead here, and they're fossicking around in the undergrowth. Thank you very much for your question. I'm sure you're enjoying your summer. Well, we suffer through our African winter, which isn't much of a sufferance at all. You want to know how easy is it to tell if it is a male, or the difference between a male and a female leopard call? The answer is I can't tell the difference immediately. It's not, the male is louder. So if you heard one after the other, it would probably be fairly easy. But if you hear them separately, it can be extremely difficult to tell. There are lots of people who will say, oh, there's a male leopard calling. But there's a startling lack of evidence for that, you see, because you're seldom watching the animal when it calls. So I'm always suspicious of people who say, well, they can tell straight away whether it's a male or a female calling. But if you see them, obviously, it's quite easy. And I think if you hear them calling together, which is extremely rare, then it becomes quite more easy. So, yeah, I'm very skeptical about trying to say whether the leopard that I hear calling is a male or a female. Tracks. Michael from New Jersey, thank you for your question. A slightly more delicate matter. You'd like to know if I've ever been afraid of a big cat. The answer is absolutely. I've been afraid of a big cat a few times. And interestingly, I mean, when you see a lion on foot for the first time, no matter what the animal does, I mean, most lions will get up and move away, or stand their ground and give you a growl, and if you walk away, they'll leave you. But what happens is, when you see the sign size of a lion on foot, and you realize that you are sort of defenseless, especially if you're not armed. And being armed is a very false sense of security anyway out here. It's a very primal feeling that you get from seeing an animal like that on foot. So if you're standing, I mean, I'm not a large man, I'm about 5'8", but if you're standing, if a male lion stands up next to you, I mean, he'll take me, they're almost 5 feet at well, not quite, they're about 4.5 feet at the shoulder. So, I mean, they're pretty tall. And they weigh about between 180 and 220 kilograms. So that's a good three times what I weigh. So, I mean, they're an impressive beast to see, combined with their fearsome reputation. And there's something primal in our evolutionary history with them that makes us sort of react to them in a certain way. And it's definitely a feeling of not so much fear the first time, but whoa. But the only time I've been genuinely afraid was when a leopard jumped onto the front of my Land Rover. It was being harassed by some wild dogs at the time, and that's why it was very angry. It leapt on top of the Land Rover. And thankfully, the tracker who I was working with, a wonderful chap called Elvis was sitting at the back, thankfully, because normally he would have been sat on the front. And the leopard leapt onto the tracker seat and mauled it, tore it to pieces, and dug his teeth into it and ripped at it with his claws, and then jumped off the vehicle. And I was genuinely terrified that day that he was going to come over the top and into the car, and that would have been something of a disaster. In the way of tracks. We'll persevere along this road until it crosses the drainage line, and then from there we'll make another plan. Spectacularly beautiful morning. Often if it's completely clear, the sky tends to wash out quite fast and we lose this glorious sort of golden light quite quickly. But today it's just magnificent. On Twitter, thank you for your question. You want to know the roads that we follow. I'm assuming you mean in the reserve. Are they old animal paths, or have they been put here by us and do the animals use them? The answer is a bit of both. It's a good question, Jan. Animals do like to use our roads because they provide less resistance. Same reason that if you had to choose to walk through some wet grass or on a path, you choose the path. So that's one element of it. The other element of it is that some of the roads that we have put through here are tracks that were on old sort of, they're not migration routes, but maybe routes down to a waterhole or to a particularly good grazing area, and especially made by hippo, who tend to follow quite similar paths when they come out of the water at night, and also sometimes rhino if they are moving to water. They tend to follow similar paths. So the answer is both. The road placement on a game reserve is an enormously important part of it, because yes, you do want to get to the areas where you think the animals are going to be the most, but you also want to be very sensitive about where you place the roads, and so you don't cause erosion. Twitter, you ask a fascinating question. Thank you. You want to know, can animals smell our fear? Lisa, I don't believe that fear smells like much. But what I will tell you is that animals, they communicate in a very different way from us most of the time. They don't, our vocal communication is so much of who we are that we've lost a lot of the other stuff. A lot of the ability to interpret smells and sights, these smells and body language and that sort of thing, and even something like almost like an energy, an emotional state that we do definitely portray. And so I think, I'm just going to turn the vehicle around here. We're heading slightly in the wrong direction now. So Lisa, I think an animal will pick up quite strongly on our body language and on our hold on a second. On our body language, I think they pick up on our energy as well. So it's the same as when you walk into a room and you feel you meet someone for the first time, you get a good feeling from them or you get a bad feeling, or I mean you'll attach a value to whatever that feeling is. And I think animals get the same thing. So they can tell if we're afraid, definitely. I mean, we know they can. You know they can with a dog. And a wild animal's even more in tune than a dog is. Now, your question probably is the first part of a question that asks, will an animal then attack if you feel fear? And the answer is not by default, no. Very few animals will attack unless they feel cornered or threatened. But I don't think fear necessarily has a distinct smell. I wouldn't bet my money on it though. Me few coins, I wouldn't bet on that. David in Michigan, welcome to this magnificent African dawn. You want to know, how safe is a tracker basically on the front of the vehicle, and what sort of guidelines or safety procedures are there in place? Have I ever heard of a tracker being taken out? The answer is I've never heard of a tracker being taken out by an animal. Where I used to work, what we used to do was if we had in a predator sighting, we'd put the tracker back inside the car. But often that was more for the sake of the predator than it was for the tracker, because predators tend to feel threatened, and then they possibly might become dangerous by that sort of very obvious human form sitting on the front of the vehicle. That said, there are lots of reserves where that doesn't happen and there's never been an issue. I think there is the odd, I think I've heard of one incident of a tracker being knocked off a tracker seat by an elephant, but not killed. So it's, as long as you sort of stay part of the vehicle, it tends to be a fairly safe thing to do. Activity in the night. There doesn't seem to be much leopard activity this morning. Right, we have a great question from Jane in Iowa. Just let me check for some tracks here, Jane, and then I'm going to stop and answer your question because it's an important one. It's very important, in fact. All right, let me just find you a spot where Phil can take a picture of the magnificent sun. Seeming lack of any kind of mammal life. Right, I'm going to stop here. Phil, if you can just get us a shot there of the sun. Jane in Iowa, you wanted to know, you talking about habituation of cats especially, and the issues associated with that American tourist, I think she was, who was killed in the lion park last week. Now, this incident has created untold hassles for game reserves like the one I'm sitting on here. So, the first thing to say, Jane, is that that place where the incident took place, tragic as it was, it's a lion park. It's not a game reserve by any stretch of the imagination. Those animals are fed by human beings. A lot of them were raised by human beings. A lot of them have had, so they've all had contact with human beings that has resulted in them losing their natural fear of human beings, especially with regard to being fed by human beings. Now, that is very distinct and very different from a game reserve like we're in now, where animals are habituated to vehicles. So they are habituated to the vehicles, they are not afraid of the vehicles, but they do not associate the vehicles with food or anything else like that. So often what happens is, if we go walking in this area, we are certainly able to do that safely, because the animals that we see have a natural fear of us, and they don't associate, and they maintain that fear of us, which is ancient, and they don't associate us with any kind of with food or with physical contact, which they've had in those sort of zoo environments, which is where that incident took place. So if new lions come into this area, what they do is they will normally run away from us, especially if they see you on foot. Their initial reaction is one of complete fear. It's not one of, let me jump on there and see what that tastes like. The reason that happened in the lion park, and this is very crucial for people to understand, is that it's not a natural environment at all. It's a contrived has negative connotation. I mean, there may be some valuable work that they're doing there. I don't know exactly, but all of those animals have had physical contact with human beings, and they've been fed by people, and so they don't have a natural fear of us. It's completely different from a wild system like this. Okay, Jane, I hope that answers your question. It's a very important one, and anything that's unclear about my answer, I'm more than happy to explain to you, because the last thing in the world we want, I mean, our tourism and ecotourism in this area is the biggest job creator, one of the biggest job creators we have in South Africa. And if incidents like that were to impact negatively on the job creation and the conservation value that tourism has, it will be extremely sad. So I'm more than happy to talk about it, and more than happy to answer any questions about it. I have never heard of an incident in an area like this, in a natural game reserve, where that has happened, where an animal has taken somebody. Yes, there have been incidents in game reserves, but that's almost always with animals either at night, where people are being silly and they're walking around without torches or without security guards, where they've been expressly told not to, and where animals have been handled by human beings, and so they don't have that natural fear of us. There's a leopard on the road. Right there. Oh. Isn't that wonderful? He's been sitting there listening to me waffle on, thinking, what is this guy talking about? Isn't that wonderful? We're just going to let him get used to us for a few minutes, or just a minute, and then I'm going to sneak slowly forward and get a better view. I don't know who he is. I'm sure some of you leopard experts there will be able to tell me. When we get a bit closer, you might even be able to tell me now. He looks pretty relaxed. What a wonderful stroke of luck that is. Right, I'm just going to sneak forward. I'm, from this distance, going to guess that that's a young male. But let's go and have a quick look. Well, in fact, let's have a long look. Straight at him if I can avoid it, because the Land Rover's got these two big headlights at the front of it that make it look like eyes, and we just want him to be very relaxed around us. Just turn off here. He's definitely listening to us. This does look like a young male to me. And if any of you have got any idea, I'd love to know who you think he is. No, this isn't a young male. This is quite an aged male. He's got 5 spots on the one side, and he's got a damaged right eye. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this could be Tingana, is that correct? Sorry, I meant Mvula. I believe that he has a damaged eye. Yeah, he looks like one. He's not a very large male leopard, this, but he's rather magnificent, isn't he? Yeah, you can see by his tattered ears that he's not a youngster anymore. But that eye, I haven't seen it before, but I have heard it described as being extremely badly damaged, and it looks to me like it's healing quite nicely. Astonishing power that animals have to heal out here. So he's got 4 spot patterns on his right. Oh, look at him. Yeah. So I've just had a little update there that says 3.5 weeks ago that eye was badly bloodshot and damaged. That was just before I got here. And you can see how incredibly it's healed. And especially an animal like this, a leopard, has to be, I mean, their ability to heal has to be exceptional, because if they get injured at all, remember, they live completely on their own, and so there's no one to help them eat or look after their territories, so they must be able to heal exceptionally well. Now that eye looks to me, I mean, when he squints over to the right-hand side, so our left, then you can see a bit of blood, but otherwise it looks pretty much healed. It's still a bit milky, but clearing nicely. So I like to use the spot patterns when I identify leopards. And he's got 4 on the right-hand side, so our left-hand side as you're looking at him. If you look at the spots, for those of you who have just joined us or who are new to leopard identification, the most reliable way of doing it, if you know them well, then it's pretty easy. But if you just want to quickly look, there you get a very nice view. Phil, can you zoom in on the? Is that as far in as we can get? Okay, so just above his whiskers there is a unique spot pattern of 4 spots. 3 very faint, at least 1 very faint in the front, and then 3 behind that. Yeah, you can see now when he looks to the side that his eye doesn't look great. So we've got some information coming in. Thank you to all of you who have managed to identify him as Mvula. He's got a 4-3 spot pattern. I'm looking at that eye again. Ellen in Georgia, I think it is. You let me know that it wasn't the actual eye, but the inside of the lid. Now, sorry, George Ann. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. If I look at him now, there's definitely an injury on the inside lid, but his eye doesn't come around back into place in the socket like it should. I wonder if he's still got sight in that eye. Ooh, that doesn't look so good now. It always amazes me how incredibly much the people who watch this show know about the leopards. It's fantastic to have the repository of knowledge like that. Kirsty, you're looking at him thinking he looks like he's got quite a full belly. I would agree. Difficult to say with him lying down like this, but I would agree that from what I can see now, it looks to me like his belly is full. So he may well have had himself a bit of a snack last night. Remember, those of you who've just maybe perhaps tuned in or come to us for the first time, please send us your questions and comments to #SafariLive or questions@wildearth.tv. They can be about this magnificent cat, or they can be about anything at all that you want to ask about. Well, within reason. I'm not great on nuclear physics. And welcome to anybody who's new to us. We love to have you on board. Ooh, shh. Was that not spectacular? Now you'll listen to see if there's a response. I believe he and Tingana have been having a bit of a territorial standoff of late. So he'll listen to see if there's a response. that sound travels a huge distance. Wasn't that special? Yeah, he's got a pretty full belly there, Kirsty. I've so often heard that. I think I've seen it maybe once or twice before. Teresa, Sharon, Purple Rain, and Tula. Purple Rain, I doubt that's the birth name you got. It's a pretty good Twitter handle, though. You've been in discussion. First of all, Teresa, you said that he's identifiable by the M between his eyes. There are quite a few male leopards that have that. He's going to call again. So, Teresa, that M is not unusual on the front of a leopard. Yeah, it's a nice confirming sort of marking on a leopard like this. But the most obvious, or the best way to look at them is that spot pattern. But, I mean, you know this animal on sight. Those of you who've seen him a few times, you know him on sight. Then, Tula and Purple Rain, you were discussing whether you thought that the eye has any sight in it left. My guess is going to be that it's probably severely compromised, and it would be fascinating to know from a vet. But it's difficult to say from this, from sitting here and from my lack of medical experience, whether he'd be able to see out of it or not. I'm not sure. But judging by the size of his belly, it would say to me that he's probably hunting okay. And they can do that with one eye. There's no reason they shouldn't. Where he goes. Yeah, he's marking his territories in the middle of some form of territorial dispute. Can anyone tell me how he lost? Watch him spray now. He's going to spray that bush, rub his scent onto it, and now spray his scent. There we go. Anyone tell me how the injury happened? Was it with a fight with another male? Smelling there. Isn't that wonderful? So the spray there, very important. Any pine, you want to know, will his saliva play a role? I'm just going to try and get around here. We can't go through there. Any role in healing his eye? It might. I mean, certainly they lick wounds, and he could lick his paws and touch his eye with it. So there may be some form of certainly cleansing from that. But in terms of its antibiotic effect, I'm not really sure. I think the issue with his eye there, the issue with his eye is going to be that it's structural damage more than it's infection. It's just there in front of us, around this next little bend. Southern California, thank you for your information on this, on Mvula's father, whose name apparently was Tumbela. Now, Tumbela means to hide, which is a lovely name for a leopard. And apparently he was also blind in his right eye. So, and lived to a very ripe old age. Apparently this leopard is 10. Using those bushes that he's marking now. It's called a Gowrie bush, and none of the animals like to graze them, so he'll mark that. Nobody is entirely sure how he hurt himself or what hurt him. So thank you for your answers. Purple Rain, you say there's been quite a lot of speculation. Thank you for that. If I might add my speculative guess to this, I would say male lions like this are normally only harmed by other male lions, at least male leopards, or sometimes by lionesses. They sometimes get caught in fights with lionesses, which is very stupid of them, because they're much smaller than a lioness. Oh, that's a great shot. But I would say, given that what we've seen of his sort of territorial dispute with Tingana over the last few weeks, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what happened to his eye. If Tingana's powerful. Hello everybody, sorry you lost us there. He's been in this drainage line, and we do sometimes lose signal here. I'm sorry about that. We'll have a word with Eugene, possibly withhold his breakfast because of it. But we're back now. And this is just really special. To follow a male leopard like this, for me, is an incredible experience. And he's marking his territory very fastidiously. I'm just going to try and get that smell of popcorn that they say comes from a leopard marking. It smells like pee to me. He's heading along this road slowly, marking his territory. We are going to probably descend again, so if you lose us, I apologize in advance. He's just looking. He may have heard something down there in the drainage line that takes his fancy. I think he has eaten fairly recently. Now look how he's stuck his tail up there. Phil, can we get in close on his tail there, please? On his tail. Can you see the white little pom-pom on the end of his tail there? fascinating to me. What they do is when they hear birds starting to alarm call, they often flick that tail up and the birds sort of calm down. It's amazing. It's like he's saying to them, guys, I'm not after you. Don't give away my presence. So he's seen something, I would guess, that makes him not want to be alarmed at. It's the best thing in the world when you come around a corner and find a spotted cat like that just walking up the road. Going up out of the drainage line, which is excellent. Diane on Twitter, you have a geographical question which given my newness to this reserve, I'm not going to answer with particular accuracy. We are in the, you want to know where on the reserve we are? Oh, look at that. So he leaves the scent of his whole body in there. That's just wonderful. We are in and around the Mvula drainage line, the southern end thereof. So that's why you keep losing our signal every so often. to the game drive, so please excuse me 1 second. Good morning, Ephraim. We've got a male leopard here. If I'm not mistaken, we're on that 2-track that goes parallel with the Mvula, probably Nyala Road south. He marks the same bushes every time, just about. Always a Gowrie bush. Hello, Carol. Nice question there. How long does a leopard live? Well, a leopard in captivity will potentially live up to 20 years because life is just much easier if you're being fed every day. But in the wild like this, seldom beyond 15. 15 would be pretty old. He's 10, apparently. He looks older than that to me, but that's because of the stresses and strains of living in the wild. And he's not a very big male, this one. So he's done really well to get where he has and dominate like he has. He's just smelling quickly. He's picked something up in the air, and he's listening. He's totally silent as he moves. Debbie on Twitter, thank you for your question. You wanted to know how old he will be when he loses. Debbie, the answer is when he dies, basically. His territory is old and weaker, and if he does get thrown out of it by a younger male, he won't last long. So the answer is 14 or 15 years is normally when he'd lose his territory. He's seen something up ahead. I can't see what it is. And he heard a Franklin to the right, that's why he looked there. Isn't that wonderful how silent he is? There's some squirrels that have seen him, and they're alarm calling. That's what you can hear off to the right-hand side. That's not a particularly attractive trait of the leopard, or any animal, I suppose, but must be done. This morning. Welcome back, everybody. I'm so sorry about those technical issues we're having. It is because, as somebody once said to me, figuring this stuff out is like figuring out the dark arts. But basically, we've been in a very low-lying area, a lot of cloud cover today, so probably a slight change in pressure, which does make the signal difficulties quite bad. So sorry about that, but we're still with Mvula, and it's a wonderful privilege just to be spending the morning with him. He's now having a... He's eating buffalo dung. That's fascinating. I've never seen this before. He's clearing off the crusty top and actually going for the the wet stuff underneath. Oh, I hope none of you have eaten relatively recently. Now, I can only imagine that he's doing that for the sort of leftover nutrients, or perhaps even the bacteria that are in dung like that. Isn't that fascinating? Leopard on Nyala Road North. Male leopard, Nyala Road North. Yes, affirmative. 1 second while I talk on the radio. Guys, this is Mvula. I've got a bit disorientated on the road, but I'm pretty sure we're on the road. The animal is very relaxed. So we're just going to, I think, unless anybody in the Twitterverse wishes to see something else, and I'd have to say you'd need to have your head read, perhaps. We're going to carry on following him because he's just... Did you see that? Did you see how when that bird started alarm calling, his tail flicked straight up? And there he's holding it. While the testicular shouts at him, he's holding the tail up. You can hear the testicular going. Psh, 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 psh. It's so nice when that happens. And now as the bird stops calling, he gets a bit further away. So he drops his tail down. Isn't that wonderful? While we're doing this, because you can see exactly what a fresh leopard track looks like on this sort of substrate. And the answer is pretty unobvious. Not easy to see. Jen and Kay, you ask an interesting question. Is he scent marking for the benefit of other leopards, or is he also doing it for other predators such as lions? Jen and Kay, a leopard like this will do everything in his power to avoid attracting the attentions of any other predator, especially lions. So it's definitely not for lions. Would lions smell it? Without question. But it's not for them that he's doing it. It's purely for the benefit of other male leopards, especially probably Tingana. Spotted something there. To know, do leopards mark only the perimeter of their territories or also the middle? They will mark much more on the perimeter than they will in the middle, but they will mark the odd bush in the middle as well. Far more on the perimeter. On the ground, he's having a snooze. I'm going to get in there and see if we can't get a little bit closer. I need to try and figure out exactly where I am so I can help the other rangers in. York, you ask a fascinating question. You want to know about colouring in leopards, and do they have... Sorry, Claire, I'm going to answer your question now. I've just got to guide somebody else in here. We need to help the other rangers. Quite far, I think. Just keep coming. I have got your audio. Okay, Claire, in New York. Sorry, I'm talking into the radio. I don't think Ephraim needs to know about Claire in New York. Claire, the colour on leopards is very much just based on genetics, like blonde hair or dark hair. It's not the light playing tricks with you. You absolutely are seeing different colours. Some are more gold, some are whiter. And I'm just going to move forward so that these guys can get a better view. This is Nyala Road, is it?
Yeah, the Nyala North, because WildEarth James right here. Thanks very much. Thanks for Inga and for glass. Which glove?
Brent's glove, yes. Ephraim has picked up Brent's glove. That means we're going to have 2 gloves tomorrow, which is excellent news indeed.
This one is a Mvula. The biggest boy.
You can hear the cameras snapping viciously behind me from the other guests. So just back to the colour, I have, in my experience, certainly it seems to be very much passed on from the mothers. And the leopards that I have known, there was one very famous leopard in the Sabi Sands called a 3/4 female, made very famous by John Varty and his films. And the 3/4 female was very pale, but like Karula, I think, pretty pale, pretty white. And then just around the corner, there was a female called the Vomba female, and the Vomba female was like molten gold. She was the most magnificent colour. And he's just cleaning himself like any house cat would.
You start again.
Wesley, you ask a you've got a fascinating question here. You asked us why do leopards ever interact with things like rhino or buffalo? Basically, you're asking, do they stalk animals that are possibly too big for them to kill? The answer is yes, especially young males. They're the ones that tend to play and push the boundaries, just like human beings. And so I have seen 2 young males, 2 brothers, sort of aged 18 months, stalking a rhino. The rhino took absolutely no notice of them. I think he noticed them, but didn't kind of pay them any attention at all. And that was hilarious to see. So they do. They will stalk the giraffe and all sorts of things that they probably won't kill. There are records of male leopards killing giraffe, but I think those are extremely rare. And just to keep you updated, especially for our newer viewers, we don't show rhino. We do see them every so often, but we tend not to show them. We don't like to make their presence known because of the issues around poaching that we have. And so we avoid showing them. We don't see many of them here, but there are some around every so often.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know you're getting it. Don't do it. Then the sun. Yeah, I think it may be so. Fine. They say the eyes are good.
Gilly from Wisconsin, you'd like to tell me that he has a 2-lane landing strip down his back, which is a good identifier, whereas his son, Kunyuma, has got a 4-lane landing strip. I can sort of see what you mean, actually. I've never looked at that before. Thank you, Gilly. That is, I can see what you mean by a 2-lane landing strip. Just where Phil is focusing now, just above the tail, you can actually see quite a nice little 2-lane landing strip there. So that's quite a nice one.
Getting up.
Brenda from Pennsylvania, you ask about wind direction and leopards. It's a good question, and one that comes up quite often for very good reason. You wanted to know, were we downwind of him while we were walking? We were in fact upwind, so he was walking with the wind, whereas he was walking largely in a northerly direction, and most of the weather on a day like this is a gentle breeze from the southeast. So when he's marking territory, he can't really afford to worry too much about the wind, otherwise he'd be walking north for the rest of his days and end up somewhere in Egypt by the time he finished his life. So they will probably pay attention to the wind when they are hunting, but when he's marking territory, I don't think they pay much attention to it. And in fact, I've yet to see an animal obviously walk around the wind to avoid sort of trying to give away their presence. I suspect they probably do, but not as much as we think. That babbler you can hear has now just spotted him, getting a bit upset. And as the babbler started calling, so that little tail has started to flick up and down. See that? You ask a good question. It's a valid one, and it is one that we have to be constantly cognizant of all the time. You want to know that does the vehicle noise not compromise his hearing while we're driving along behind him? The answer is definitely. There's no question that compromises his hearing, but we do it in the most sensitive manner that we can. So you'll notice how often, as soon as I stop the vehicle, I turn it off, so I don't let the engine run while we stopped. I tried to speak more quietly around him, and also the thing is that we couldn't follow them without the vehicle. Ideally, you want an electric vehicle, and we've used some out here, but because we're in the bush, the only electric vehicles I've ever used tend to break down quite quickly out here. In fact, one of them burst into flames, which isn't ideal when you're on game drive. And so that going forward, when electric vehicles become easier to maintain, especially out here, that's what we'll use. But for now, this little petrol engine that we've got in this car is the quietest that we can get, and so that's what we use. But Carla, yes, we need to be very cognizant, especially if they're hunting, of the noise that we do make. Also, the smell from a vehicle like this is, enormous. So the bush around this leopard will smell completely different because of the petrol fumes and the oil and everything else that comes off the car. Some excellent questions around his calling earlier. Some of you want to know, is that what we refer to as leopard sawing? Yes, absolutely it is. That's precisely what the sawing is. And then Genevieve in New York, you want to know, could I actually feel the vibrations? Not from the distance that I was, but the only other cat out here that has a similar vocal setup, which is a lion, if you get close enough to them, you can definitely feel it in the middle of your chest. And close enough to that animal while he's calling, especially if he's in a drainage line where it starts to echo, you definitely do feel it. You feel it kind of in the middle of your chest. You feel your ribs rattling around. It is an awesome sound. He spotted something. See how mangled his ears are.
Mvula. Yeah, it's built by Professor James.
And now you can hear the white-browed scrub robin starting to call, my favorite midday call. It's almost like it signaled him to have a snooze.
Yeah, I can do it.
Do you want me to go forward a bit? I'm just going to sneak a little bit forward so the others can see. Hello, Dave in Toronto. Another question that comes up quite often, and it's also very interesting. You want to know about melanistic leopards or black leopards, and do they occur in the wild? They do occur in the wild. I have never seen one, though. Not so much in this area, more naturally in forested areas where that kind of coloration is an advantage. I know that there are a few in the wild up near Leidenberg, which is on the Highveld, up on beyond the Drakensberg escarpment. There have been a few seen in the wild there. It's one of my great dreams to see a melanistic leopard in the wild. But they definitely do occur. And the most famous one, of course, comes from literature, from the Jungle Book. There's a black leopard called Bagheera in the Jungle Book. I'd love to try and move around and get a better view of his eye, but I'm afraid at this stage we'd have to flatten about 7,000 trees to do so, and in so doing we'd disturb him. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stay right where I am, if that's okay. Can you see him?
Yeah, I guess he's flat. Okay.
I'll try and find you a picture of one. Brent has left his extensive library in the car. I'm not sure that I have one though, so let me have a quick look. But a black leopard is basically that, you can still see the spots on a black leopard. It's just the bits in between the spots are black. I'm not sure if I have a picture here. No. I'm afraid I do not have a picture here. I don't have a picture of a melanistic leopard. Russell in Irvine, California, would we ever consider giving medical care to a leopard? The answer is probably not. We'd take each case on merit. We certainly wouldn't with this one, because we don't really know what's wrong with his eye. We're pretty sure that he's surviving okay, and as far as possible we're going to let nature take its course. Where we do interfere is when there is an endangered species, so like a cheetah or a wild dog. Then we'll often call the vet in if there's an injury or something like that, and we reckon the vet could fix it. The vet will come in and dart the animal and probably then do a quick fix and then release it again. As far as removing the animal from the area goes and then fixing it and reintroducing, that presents enormous problems. But certainly there's some species we'd take out and try and rehabilitate and maybe put them back into the bush. But in general, we will let things, unless it's been caused by human beings, we will let nature take its course. I think that it's worth staying here just a little bit longer to look at him, especially given that there is not much else going on the reserve at the moment. And then there is a waterhole just north of where we are now. We'll pop along there and have a look just now. Let's just let him lie here and entertain us for a bit longer. If you're joining us for the first time, I know in the last little while we've had quite a few new viewers, and it's wonderful to have you along. Any questions you have, hashtag Safari Live or questions at wildearth.tv. So that's hashtag Safari Live or WildEarth. Questions at wildearth.tv. Ellen Fowler, for your comment. You said that Mvula is known to be one of the largest leopards in the Sabi Sands. I have to tell you, I've seen much bigger leopards than this in the Sabi Sands, but that has been, I haven't been in the area for a while. I'll tell you why I say I don't think he's that big. When he stands up, he doesn't have that very marked, what we call a dewlap, which is a sort of flap of muscle and skin that comes down underneath the jaw. And he doesn't seem to have nearly as pronounced one as other males I've seen. He also, he's not as wide around the shoulders as some leopards I've seen in this area. He's quite tall, but I'm not sure that it'd be fascinating to weigh him. But thank you for that, Ellen. I find it fascinating talking about animal sizes because we all get such different impressions of them. Hello, Blair in New Zealand. I'm not sure what time of the day it is there. I suppose you're probably about to have your evening snifter. Thank you for your question. You want to know about what other leopards I've interacted with in the Sabi Sands. I was last here working about 5 years ago, so it was some time back. And the males that I interacted with then were mainly two at Londolozi called the Campan male. He was the other one. He was the big one. And then one called the short-tailed male. Those were the two big territorial males in the area at the time. I would say that the short-tailed male was probably a similar size to Mvula, and that the Campan was fairly substantially larger. I mean, look, my eyes may be playing tricks on me, but that's what I would guess. But I hadn't interacted with any of these because they're far north of where I used to work. But they could be related, A lot of the leopards are related to each other, and the best way, of course, would be to do some form of genetic test. But so he might be related to one of those two. He could even be the son, but I'm not sure. It's a beautiful light now as the sun comes out, and you can just see how perfectly camouflaged he is in this sort of area. Kirsty from Oklahoma. You want to know, do you think he's in... Do I think he's in relatively good condition, body-wise? I mean, apart from his eye? I would say yes, he is. He looks pretty fat. I think he's eaten... Somebody pointed out, I think it was Jane, that he looks pretty fat, and he does look fat from either a meal last night or... certainly yesterday. I'm not sure how big the meal was, but he's certainly eaten something, and I'd say he's in pretty good condition, yeah. His coat is shiny, it's not matted at all, so he's looking after himself. His ears are a bit torn to pieces, but I mean, that's just a function of his age. That's not a function of any kind of health problem. His only issue is that eye, but if he's eaten last night, it would seem to me that he's doing okay. You start to see quite quickly on an animal like this, if he starts losing body condition, what will happen is that his hips will start to show, and in any cat, the first thing that goes is the stomach, because they are meat eaters. If they've eaten, if they're full, their stomachs will be full, and they sort of take on that condition. Then their stomachs get skinny when they're hungry, and then when they start to lose condition, their hips will start to show, and that's when you'd really know that they're losing condition and they're not having a great time. And that will happen when they're old. But you can see from him, I mean, you can't see his hips at all. So he's in fine condition. There's nothing wrong with him at all. And the colour on him is just spectacular at this time of the morning. So maybe we should have a short poll. We'll have a 5-minute poll on the internet. If you want to stay with him, let me know. If not, if you want to go and try and find something else, then we could just as easily do that. So let's have a quick poll and see if we're happy to stay with this sleeping cat, or if you'd like to move on and see what else we can see. I mean, he is a magnificent animal. He has given us a hell of a show this morning. Virginia from Kentucky. I'm assuming that's not Kentucky, from Virginia. That's just a small South African joke about the US. Thank you for your question. It's a good one. Are there any melanistic lions? There was a picture going around the internet a little while back that said melanistic lion found, and they had this incredible picture of this big black maned lion, and he was almost entirely black. It was an exceptional Photoshop job done by somebody. I've never heard of a melanistic lion before, but I have heard of the opposite, which is leucism, which of course, and the most famous example of that, of course, is the leucistic lions of the Timbavati, or the white lions of the Timbavati. And their genes exist around this area to this day. I mean, there's some as far afield as just beyond Satara in the Kruger Park, on the, I think it's called the Hwanetsi concession, where Singita has a lodge. And then there are still some in the actual Timbavati where the original white lions were found, and that's in that area there. I've not heard of any melanistic lions, though. That's not to say it's never occurred in history, but I've yet to hear of one. So the white lions, which are not entirely white, they're sort of blonde versus tawny, and they seem to do pretty well. But I think a black lion would really struggle out here. I'm not sure they'd be tolerated. Beautiful light on this cat. He's seen something. Just going to stay very awake now. Mary Ann in Boston. You want to know, when he lifts his tail like that, this is interesting. He's stalking something. Mary Ann, I'm going to answer your question. You want to know, and it's a good one. When he lifts... no, he's going back to sleep. When he lifts his tail like that, when a bird is alarm calling at him, you want to know, does it actually have an effect? we saw earlier, absolutely it has an effect. As soon as that testicular started alarm calling, he lifted his tail, and the birds definitely stopped alarm calling with quite the vigor that it was. It's not particularly effective, but it definitely does make a difference. There's now a Franklin that spotted him, and as the Franklin started alarm calling, he started flicking his tail. And the Franklin seems to have stopped now. So, Marianne, good question. It probably doesn't happen. It's not as effective as he'd like it to be, but it definitely has some sort of effect. So there seems to be a fierce debate about whether we should stay with him or go. I'm going to suggest that we press on for a little bit and maybe come back here a bit later and just leave him be for a while. I don't think he's been affected by us at all, but I don't think he's going to do much for the rest of the day. So if it's okay with you, we're going to move on from here. And we might pop back a little bit later, depending on what else we see. And perhaps he will have moved. Most likely, as is the case with cats, he'll be just lying there doing nothing. So here we go. Wasn't that just a fantastic way to spend a couple of hours in the African dawn? Who's at the Djuma Cam. Sorry, Phil, I've just put about 6-inch thorns into the back of Phil's head. Don't worry, you'll be okay. You've seen a giraffe at the Djuma Cam. We're going to try and get over there. It's quite far from where we are now, though. But let's see if we can't get there. Waterhole, like I said to you a bit earlier, so we're going to head off there and see what we can spot there, and then we'll make our way over towards Gowrie Dam, or where the Djuma Cam is. Wisconsin. You ask about melanistic zebra. I've never seen one in the wild. I'm pretty sure they do occur, especially, and I know all over South Africa there are people breeding what we call rare game. So melanistic impala, which are totally black, melanistic zebra perhaps, and various other weird and exotic creatures. You see, the thing about the melanism is that it doesn't confer much of an advantage on an animal, depending on where it lives. So, hellenistic zebra, for example, will struggle out here because they don't have the advantage that the stripes confer on other zebra. So in an area absent of predators, they'd be fine, but probably not so much in an area like this. I always like to come up here and check on this lonely hippo. He's always on his own. The white-breasted cormorant.
Come back, come back.
I'm going to answer your question now. I've just managed to get us stuck in a bit of a hole here. Thankfully, Phil saw it happening and told me. Oh, there we're out. Sorry. So there is that poor lonely hippo who's on his own. Go across him now. Susan from the Netherlands, you want to know about when the leopards stand up in the bush like that and rub themselves on it. Are they doing it to sort of overemphasize, if I understand your question correctly, to overemphasize their size to make them seem taller? The answer is no, I don't think so. I think they all do it to cover as much of the bush as possible. So they will jump up into the bush to try and cover as many of the leaves as they can, and also possibly mark a little bit higher so that the scent is not rubbed off by animals like a buffalo or something like that walking past and rubbing up against it. So I don't think it's a question of trying to overemphasize their size so much as it is hoping that the scent will last for longer by avoiding sort of contact with other animals and covering as much of the bush as possible. Now that poor lonely hippo, I come here every time I go on drive just to check on this poor old boy, hoping that he will find some form of companionship other than from a white-breasted cormorant, which I imagine for a hippo is not ideal. But that white-breasted cormorant also has no friends, so the two of them form a lonely little pair of solidarity here at Buffelshoek Hook Waterhole. There is also a heron there, Phil, if we can go on to him. No, that's the cormorant. The heron is to the right. He's showing himself very beautifully on the side of the water. We'll have a look at him now once we've had a look at the cormorant. And he's just demonstrating himself, advertising, probably some form of territorial advertisement. There he is. And as I like to say at this time of the day, so we have the sunrise, and it feels like the earth is taking a great big breath in anticipation of what's going to happen. And we found the leopard, and the leopard sort of walked through the bush, and the animals were alarm calling, and there was that sense of anticipation that maintained. And then almost as that first white-browed scrub robin started to call today, it was like the earth was sort of breathing out, exhaling, and that sort of mid-morning lull of peace took over the area. And that's very much the feeling that I have here at this waterhole with our two lonely friends and the preening heron. Right, and we've had another update from Siberia, the zoomy. A zoomy, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, because it's not a common term, they are the people that look after our cameras, our static cameras at the two of the waterholes, one at Arathusa and one at Djuma. And they pan and search for animals and listen out and do an incredible job just keeping tabs on what's going on at the waterholes, because we obviously can't look at them all the time. In Siberia, thank you very much for your update. She saw a giraffe there, and apparently it went off in a southeasterly direction. That's quite far from where we are now, but that's the sort of direction we're going to go in. But we really do appreciate the work that the zoomies do. It's a great task that they do for us, and it's a great task they do for conservation. They probably don't realize it, but they're making an enormous contribution to conservation, and we're most grateful to them. It's through their work that people are attracted to watching those cameras, and they're being introduced to African animals and African landscapes all the time because of them. All right, Phil, let's press on from here and see what else we can see. We'll make our way to where that giraffe was seen, and we might be lucky. Fascinating waterhole question. I'm just going to wait for this errant Birchall starling to move out of my way. Go on. There we go. You want to know about crocodiles. Now, I'm going to answer your question. We're going to go through a dip here, and you might lose picture, so I'm going to do it once we're down through the dip. By the time you exhale, you'll have us again. Right, Joan, I hope you're still there. Crocodiles like to move. So, a bit like the hippo. You would have seen probably maybe a crocodile in one of these waterholes. That's often not a permanent arrangement. They can move huge distances. We tend to think of them as being waterbound, but they're not always. There are records of crocodiles moving up to 50 kilometers, which is a long way. That's, what is that? That's 80 miles. No, sorry, it's not. It's less than that. 80 kilometers is 50 miles. So let's call it 30 miles a crocodile can move, which is a long distance, especially on those stubby little lizard legs that they've got. So you may have seen a crocodile in an area like this, but much like for that hippo, if he's on his own, or she's on her own, the chances of mating and breeding are obviously hugely reduced. So crocodiles will come through, maybe they're on their way to another river or a bigger dam, and they'll stop over for a day and then move on from there. So south of us, about 3 kilometers as the crow flies, is the Sand River, where there are plenty of crocodiles. And then to the north of us, the largest water is an enormous dam in the Nyala Game Reserve, and I suspect there are quite a few crocodiles there. I have yet to see a crocodile here at Djuma, but I would never go swimming in one of these waterholes because you just never know. They will appear one day. of the lions that were found yesterday, which is a bit sad for me because I really want to see those cubs. I haven't seen lion cubs for ages, and that sound, that call they make, of wow, wow, it's just, it fills me with a great sense that all is okay with the world. A bit of a chatter about that lonely hippopotamus, and that the lonely hippo would make quite a good book title. It probably would, especially if it was, oh, there's some Nyala there. That's a really nice little herd of Nyala. The Lonely Hippo would be quite a fun title of a book, especially if it was analogous to, say, a human being, like me, for example. And then Gerda, you ask about if when Hippo was hairy, those great children's stories. I definitely read that as a child, but I actually can't remember the story. They still sold all over South Africa, those great stories. Beautiful herd of impala, at least Nyala. They're not impala at all. They're sufficiently far away from Mvula. And for those of you who are not sure about what the story that I'm talking about when Hippo was hairy, they're African folklore stories that have been collected and published in various sort of collections. So Mvula is quite far away from us now, but one of these little Nyalas would be an ideal and fairly easy meal for him. So they'll want to stay around this area. Browsing away, remember, the spiral-horned antelope, which are the bushbuck, the Nyala and the kudu, and to some extent the eland, tend to be browsers, not grazers. So they like to eat the leaves from bushes rather than they do the grass, especially this time of year when the grass is pretty dry. Right, let us move along. I just want to thank you. The crocodile question and some of the follow-up from it has come from Teresa and X-Ranga. I hope I'm getting that name right. Apparently there was a crocodile here resident in summertime. So they'll sometimes do that, especially if they're young males who've been tossed out of a territory by the bigger ones, or even a young female who's been tossed out by larger ones. They'll come and spend sometimes extended periods in waterholes like that, and then move on. at one of the places I used to work called Nyala, just up the road, the crocodiles... Sorry, there's just a track there on the road. The crocodiles, there was a pair that lived in a dam. Quite a lot bigger than that dam. I think it's from an elephant. So quite a lot bigger than the dam we were at earlier. And the pair was a permanent residence because they could breed there. So thanks for that, Teresa and ex-Ranga. We might lose our picture here. If you do, I'm sorry. About, if I'm understanding the question correctly, about fire damage. Sorry, that's Kathleen. And Kathleen, fire damage in the area, I haven't seen a huge amount here. There was a fire on one section of this reserve, but we haven't been through it here today. So fire damage is something that is necessary out here sometimes. It clears off the moribund grass material. I think it's less necessary than perhaps is thought. You know, before, what would happen is that you'd have a lightning struck day in October, when at the end of a long dry season, and that lightning strike would burn an enormous area of land. And then when the rains came, that area would flush green. But because the fire was so big, it used to cover an enormous area with green grass and attract a lot of animals, but because it was so big, it wouldn't necessarily result in overutilization. These days, because everybody owns little parcels of land, they all burn little pieces of their land, those areas then tend to get very concentrated activity from animals, and that can do quite a lot of damage. So you've got to be quite careful about when you burn and why you burn and how you burn. Heading along a road now that's called that is a fire break. You can see that it's been cleared on either side of the road. About the crocodile continues to flow in. Thank you very much for it. Please keep it coming. I love hearing this sort of historical stuff from those of you who've basically been on Djuma longer than I have. Apparently the crocodile was around for about 12 weeks, is that correct? About 3 months? That's from Chris. Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, and then moved on. So I wonder where he went. Or 12, was 12 foot long. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my radio here. That's a pretty big croc, 12 feet. That's a pretty big crocodile. Almost, probably 3.5 meters. Do we get evergreens in the area? Well, Phil, if you would just pan out around where we're driving now, I'm going to stop here. We're now sitting almost in midwinter, Lisa. So the green that you can see is generally from either an evergreen tree or from what we call a semi-deciduous tree. Now, a semi-deciduous tree is a tree that's kind of halfway between deciduous and evergreen, and that's definitely an evergreen that fills on now. It's called a spike thorn. And a semi-deciduous tree will kind of lose their leaves at different times. So, if you go forward to that jackalberry tree there, the big green one in front of us there, all the way in front. There, that big jackalberry there, that's a semi-deciduous tree. It will look green almost all the time, but what happens is that half the tree will lose its leaves during the course of the year, and they'll grow back almost as fast as they disappear. So it doesn't go dormant completely like, say, some of the combretums. All the red bush willows, which are the major trees out here, will lose their leaves completely. In fact, all the bush willows will eventually lose their leaves completely. So something like that jackalberry, or the marudas, I mean, like that one that fills on now, that's a knobthorn, they also lose their leaves completely. And the reason for that is that the bush out here, remember, the temperature never drops that, it never gets that freezing cold, and the day never gets that short. And that means that, so unlike in sort of higher latitudes where it gets much colder and the day length gets much shorter, it's very difficult for a tree to survive, and the best strategy is for it to lose its leaves and just go dormant for the duration of the winter. Here, because of the summer, it's often quite a good strategy for a tree to maintain some leaves, because they can still photosynthesize nutrients. The sun's angle doesn't change enough for that to be a difficult process, and so that's why there are a lot of semi-deciduous and evergreen trees. That tree that we saw the leopard marking its territory on mostly is a Gowrie tree, and those are evergreen and very full of bitter chemicals, which makes animals not want to eat them, and that's the other reason that they mark on those trees, so that the marked leaves won't disappear into the gullet of some hungry herbivore. Ahead here, and you can have a look-see. There may be a piece of it that's starting to lose its leaves now, and that would be quite interesting to see. Stop it. Let's do this one actually, Phil. This one's got more going on. Yeah. So there's one in front of us, but I've just found this jackalberry next to us here. Now you can see, you might be able to, Phil, if you can zoom in as close, as tight as you can, on the top right-hand side. There we go, yeah, on that little bit there. You can see some of those leaves starting to yellow. And those are going to drop off fairly soon, but this tree it might be without leaves for, I've seen one jackalberry lose all of its leaves at one time, but a week later it's got them back again. So a jackalberry is what we'd call a semi-deciduous tree. The jackalberry's botanical name is Diospirus mespiloformes. Now that's an excellent word to use in the cold morning when you have to take a game drive and explain things to people. and your lips don't want to move in the cold, and so you say Diospirus mispiliformes many times. And people think you're stark raving off your head, and you might be, but it's a very good way of making the lips move in the morning. Diospirus mispiliformes, the semi-deciduous tree of the lowveld. Right, and on we go. Nice question there. You want to know if... Sorry, thought I saw something. You want to know if caracals or honey badgers are more often found here in the bush. The answer in this particular area is probably honey badgers. We see them a bit more. But in certain parts of the country, caracal are very common. In the Karoo, which is a semi-desert environment, and down in the centre of the country, caracal are very common. Probably more so than badgers. So it just depends on the area that you're in. This place, we do see caracal every so often, but very seldom. Badgers, if we were out at night more often, we'd probably see more badgers. But they're definitely around. We see their tracks in the morning quite a lot, but in the caracal's tracks we don't see very often at all. So this is round about where we hoped that the giraffe might be. I'm not seeing his regal horns peeping up over the trees just yet. Nor am I seeing his tracks on the road. But we are now southeast of Gowrie Dam, where Siberia saw him. You ask a fascinating question, and one that I had to have asked twice because I needed to give it a bit of thought. You say if there are certain plants that won't be eaten by animals, excuse the bumping, what prevents them from taking over an area? Is it insects or something else like that? Edward, the answer probably is that it's competition from other plants and other environmental conditions. So I'll stop here on the waterhole wall here, and I'll explain what I mean. So insects could play a part in it. In terms of the Gowrie bush, let's look at the Gowrie bush, which is where we saw the leopard marking territory. They like sort of fairly specific soil types. They like to be in drainage line areas where the nutrients have come down off the crests, so they won't grow particularly successful. So what prevents them taking over from each other, probably far more than grazers or browsers, would be competition from other trees and then soil conditions. But definitely a lack of browsing pressure on something like Dicrostachys bush, for example, or which is called the sickle bush in English, that will definitely affect their distribution and how much there is. So elephants will eat them, but not much else will eat them. So in the absence of elephants, Dicrostachys definitely do take over large swathes of areas. But the other thing that stops a Dicrostachys bush, while I think of it, is grass. So if you've got too many grazers in an area and not enough browsers, the grass sward will be eaten down, and then the Dicrostachys bushes will grow up and sort of form almost mono-specific stands of sickle bush or Dicrostachys, and then in the absence of elephants, that'll just maintain itself. So, yeah, the lack of grazing pressure makes a big difference to whether a plant will survive or take over or something like that. I hope that answers your question. Right, the giraffe has pressed on from this area, so I think we will do the same. I want to head down a little bit more to the east, where the lions, nobody's mentioned the lion tracks today, and I'm hoping that, I wonder if they won't be in that area, or certainly an indication of them. An interesting question about termites. Millions of termites out here. They tell me a greater biomass than any other animal. So more total mass of termite than there are total mass of elephant, which is quite something. And you want to know, do we have trouble with them in our buildings? There are two aspects to this question. First of all, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of building in the States is still done with timber or with timber-based products. And so I think you in the States have greater issues with termites than we do. Just about all of our building here is done with bricks and mortar, so with very little in the way of timber. And so in terms of buildings, we don't tend to have enormous termite hassles. That said, a lot of the decking, especially these lodges, is obviously all wood, and that we have to treat very carefully with special treatment chemicals to stop the termites getting into them, and eventually they do get in. But I'm not sure about this. I don't think we have the same kinds of trouble that you do perhaps in the States. I'm not really sure why. But I suspect it's got largely to do with the fact that we build mostly with bricks and mortar and very little with timber. But absolutely, termites will eat any form of dead wood that they can get their little teeth into. So we do treat the decking and any wooden pillars we have quite regularly. Phil, can we just have a look on the ground here? Now, I'm just going to jump out the car here and show you a track. Can you see this, Phil? Can you see it? All right, so we're looking at here this track that to most people would look like a snake track initially. And indeed, that's what I thought it was to start with. But if you look very carefully, you can see here, you won't be able to see it from there, but I can see it. A track here, and another one here, one here, one here, and those are feet. And as we know, the very definition of a snake is the lack of feet. And so this is the track of a monitor lizard that has been lazily dragging his tail along the ground in this very regular sort of fashion. Probably moving, we followed him this morning, he probably went all the way into the Gowrie Dam. Moved from the Twin Dams area all the way up here. And I mean, a monitor lizard is not a big animal. So quite a walk for him. And again, we had that question about the roads and whether animals use the roads and why they like to use the roads. And it's just easier for them to move along the roads, just like it is for us. So for that monitor lizard to walk along a conveniently graded road rather than through some predator-infested bush would have been a much better option. It's not the first time I've seen this track in this area. It's quite interesting. I think he's quite a mobile fellow, this monitor lizard. Plug myself back in. And just to reiterate, for our new viewers, my name is James. I have Phil behind on camera. Any questions or comments you might have, please feel free to send them through. And the Twitter handle is #SafariLive, or email us on questions@wildearth.tv. Favorite things when I'm looking for, or when we see lion prides with little babies and the big males, is to watch the interaction with the little cubs and the big males. It's always, especially, well, obviously only if they're their fathers, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. So we've got an excellent, great answer, thank you, from Tina and Joyce. And you tell me that those little lion cubs are born at the end of April, sort of 20 or 21st of April. And that's great news. So let's keep that in mind as we watch them grow. Just about, what would that make them? It'd make them almost 2 months old, would it? That's mine. Yes, almost 2 months old. So still very vulnerable. Now apparently the lions are calling towards this area this morning. But I'm not sure at this stage. An enormous amount of hyena activity on this road last night. There are some lion tracks here. Gowrie, another question from you, a great one, a nice one, because it invites speculation, and I'm not really sure. So you want to know how fast, sorry, we have got lion tracks here. You want to know how fast a leopard is in comparison with a lion. Well, some researchers reckon that they've clocked a lion doing 80 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. It's about 50 miles an hour. And I think a leopard, by virtue of its size and its similar build, will probably not be quite as fast as that. But on takeoff, I would say quicker. So they'll be from 0 to top speed in one step. But if you were to put them on, say, a 400-meter track, I think you'd find the lion was a bit quicker. So a leopard, I'm going to guess at sort of maybe 60 or 70 kilometers an hour. But very difficult to measure because they don't ever sort of run in one direction like a lion would, or certainly nothing like a cheetah would. But they're incredibly fast off the mark. I mean, their reaction speeds are unfathomable to human beings. We would just never compare. So when I was still a young trainee buck, just north of where we are now, my friend Elvis and I were tracking a leopard, and we surprised her, and she charged us. And I say charged in that all she was doing was trying to get away from us, but she did run towards us to start with. Now my training was, I was carrying the rifle at the time, and my training was that if that happens, what you do is you load, the rifle's unloaded at the time, so you load the bolt and then you aim, and you get the tracker behind you. Well, by the time I thought I got the rifle onto my shoulder really fast, but by the time I had the rifle on my shoulder and I was aiming, there was nothing to aim at. She disappeared completely. So they're so fast we can't actually conceive of how quick they move. But this is the sort of area I was hoping we might come up with the lion tracks. Be lucky. Certainly some zebra tracks. In Arkansas, thank you for your question. You've obviously heard some of the radio chatter that goes on, and you'd like to know what it means when a sighting is zoned. A zone sighting, Tim, means that we've precluded any activity around it. So, for example, if there's been a sensitive lion cub sighting, or so, for example, if a lioness has just given birth to cubs, we will zone an area or a sighting to stop people going in and putting pressure on animals. So any time that there's going to be pressure on the animal from too many vehicles, or when we don't think that having people or vehicles around or we think it'll impact negatively on an animal, then we will zone it, and that's what that means. We might also zone an area if we're doing walks. So, you know, it's nice to walk in an area when there are no vehicles around, and especially if you're approaching big game. Say you wanted to view an elephant bull on foot. To have vehicles driving around can be very distracting, and you don't want to be too distracted when you're viewing an elephant on foot, do you? So we might zone an area for that. Judy in Minnesota. You want to know how far would a lion pride move with cubs that age? The answer is pretty far. I mean, they could go, I think they could probably push those cubs to moving up to 10 kilometers in a night. But they won't, or 16 miles, and I don't think they would have gone that far. Remember that a lion pride territory is about 6,000 hectares, or what's that, about 15,000 acres. So, I mean, they will move, they won't move through that entire area. But on a reserve like this, which is 1,500 hectares, or about 4,000 acres, lions can move off and on dependent, because their territory is so much larger than the reserve we're on. But they will move, they could move if they needed to up to about 10 k's, but they don't need to. So they'll probably move to an area where she will feel that they'll be safe. She'll hide them away in a riverbank overhang, or somewhere like that in some thick bush, and then go off and hunt if she needs to. So the answer is up to 10 k's, but basically as far as she needs to move them before she needs to do what she needs to do. There are definitely some lion tracks here. Tends to get a little bit dodgy here, especially the radio signal. So we lose you, I'm sorry about that. Hello, Grant in Australia. I wonder what time it is where you are sitting right now. You want to know, have I ever seen a pangolin, or how many times have I seen a pangolin? I think I've seen a pangolin 3 times. You say it's on your bucket list to see. They're fascinating creatures to see. Just a sort of evolutionary anomaly, but like an armadillo, for those of you who don't know. An armored, scaly, insect-eating animal that lives in an order all of its own. So an order is a taxonomic grouping, one above family. So there are no other families in the pangolin's order. And they've got very sort of hard keratinous scales on their bodies. And when they're threatened, they roll up into a little ball, a bit like I think it's called a 3-banded armadillo, is the closest thing that there is in South America. And they roll up into a little ball, and then it's almost completely impossible to pry them apart. So they'll survive attacks by lions sometimes like that. And then when they unroll themselves, they're about that big, with a long sort of flappy tail and big claws to dig in termite mounds. They eat a lot of ants and termites, and that's their sort of modus operandi. No lions here. Thank you for that question, Grant. So we're just going to do a little bit of a loop around. We don't have too much time left. We'll do a loop around to the southwestern boundary and then see what we can see from there. Want to know if I have a bucket list full of animals. Yes, I do, sort of. I would really like to see a wolf in the wild, a pack of wolves. I would like to see a Kodiak bear in the wild. I would like to see a tiger in the wild. And I would like to see a jaguar in the wild. Those are the sort of bucket list animals I have. None of which I'm obviously going to see here. Helsinki, Finland. Welcome. How nice to hear from Helsinki. You want to know about the stars. Not many at this time of the day, obviously. You want to know what are they like in the Sabi Sands, and what is my favorite constellation. The stars are excellent on the moonless nights, especially in summer after the rains, or when a front, just in front of a cold front. It tends to clear the air quite nicely. So when there are no fires and when the air is clear, the stars are magnificent out here. They really are exceptional. And my favorite constellation is probably Orion, which we see in the summertime. We don't really see it this time of year. And that's just because there are a whole lot of funny legends around it, which I really enjoy. New Jersey, thank you for your question. If I understand it correctly, you're a little worried about not having a snack on drive, or can you go on a picnic with your guide? Absolutely, you can go on a picnic with your guide. I have been on many picnics out here. You can eat in front of lions if you like, at a sighting. But normally what we'd do is we'd go to a sighting, then we'd find a pretty area and settle down in for a good picnic. Some of these lodges make incredible cuisine, and they make amazing picnics, and there's no better place to enjoy a picnic like that than in a drainage line on a hot day underneath a jackalberry tree, or on a day like this up on a crest beneath some marula trees. It's really nice to be able to do that. And then in the Kruger Park, if you happen to drive yourself in, there are designated areas. There are no designated areas here, which is great. So you're left to find whatever area you'd like to have your picnic in. Minutes left, and we're popping out on the southern boundary here. I have yet to see any lion tracks crossing out, but if they did, this is where they would go, because where you saw them last night is pretty much the northern extremity of the Styx Pride's territory. Seen them crossed out. I'm sure there has been quite a lot of activity along this road today, so it's quite possible that they have. But nothing that I've seen so far, which is quite hopeful for the afternoon. on these lions this afternoon. There don't seem to be anything here at the moment. From Wisconsin. I seem to have, I'm going to stop here just for the last 2 minutes. You seem to be in a state of abject shock that I didn't mention polar bears or brown bears. By Kodiak bear, I meant a brown bear in North America, and wolves in North America too. I'd love to see them there. Polar bear is a good one. I should have put that on, and it definitely is on the list there. So let's just recap my bucket list of animals to see. I would go with wolves, European or American, Kodiak bear, polar bear, tiger. Also, I'd love to see, there's a wild dog that occurs in India, and I'd also love to see that one. Right. So the lions, I haven't seen any tracks of yet. I suspect they have crossed south. I think somebody would have found them otherwise, but we're going to keep looking during the course of the day and then in this afternoon. I think you'll probably be with Brent this afternoon. Maybe Eugene has managed to fix the vehicle, in which case we will give him breakfast, and there'll be 2 of us out this afternoon. But thank you so much for your comments and questions today. It's been wonderful having so many questions. It's kept me busy and kept me entertained and kept me talking, which is the main thing. So thank you very much. It's been a great day to see the beautiful leopard. I think we were really lucky with that. And now as the earth starts to exhale and go into that sort of soporific stage of the day, we're going to leave you and wish you a great night or morning or rest of the day, wherever you happen to find yourself in the world. Thank you for a great morning, and we will see you later.